Hi, this is Akan Walker, and I just want to take a few moments of your time to talk about this new found bomb in Gilead, legalized marijuana in the black community. And I wanted to juxtapose that with offering you Jesus Christ as a true bomb of Gilead. Now, many of us in the black community are very, very familiar with marijuana. We know it as Mary J, weed, or blunts, and other types of colloquial names that we have for this substance. And recently, we've seen a wave across our country that the legalization of marijuana is happening. In 33 states, we now have laws on the books that legalize marijuana for medicinal purposes, in 11 states that now have it for recreational purposes. And here in the state in California, we have just passed a prop in November 2016, Prop 64, that legalized marijuana for recreational use for those 21 years and older. But not only that, but also allow for the sale of that through licensing and being of age to be able to do so. Now, on the face value of it, this looks like a good look for our community because our community has been most impacted by the war on drugs that happened during the 1980s, which has led to the mass incarceration of millions of people across the country. You know, we have about 6.1 million people that are incarcerated, with a good some of them in there for drug offenses in our federal prisons. So this seemed like a very good look particularly for the black community, as we are most adversely impacted by incarceration and also adversely impacted by the war on drugs that led to that, where 60% of people of color, 60% of our jail population is people of color, and that black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated in their lifetime compared to whites. So this seemed like a slam dunk, that it seemed like it was a bomb in Gilead, an answer to our issues that relates to incarceration, but also as our issues to do with poverty in our communities. It seemed like it was a slam dunk that this may be a way for black-owned businesses to once flourish in the communities that we live in, and that they were able to open up dispensaries and go from an underground market to a public market that is now credible and generate the black golden dollar to circulate in our own communities. However, according to an article that I just read out of the CalMatters.org, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit that creates articles and analysis related to policies and issues here in California, it seems like that we are still being left behind out of that conversation as it relates to creating dispensaries of black-owned businesses that are dispensaries, even though the Prop 64 put into the law that it would also have equity programs that would help individuals that are from communities that are most impacted from the war on drugs. Even with that written into it, there's still so many barriers that black people and people of color are not been able to break into that market. And so here we go again, that we're still left out. Our communities are still in disarray, even with the legalization of marijuana. So I think the problem is it's not so much of a physical problem. It's not so much of an economic issue. It's not so much of a social issue in the black community. I feel that it's more of a spiritual issue that's going on. And I say this very candidly, that this issue, and that's why legalization of marijuana is not really addressing the issues that we see in poverty nor in incarceration rates in our community, because we have failed to answer the question as it relates to what is the root cause of this that's happening in our communities. And it's a spiritual one. And I believe that with all my heart that we are experiencing what I like to call post-traumatic stress, or post-traumatic stress in our community-wide. Community trauma. And this comes from since 1619, when the first slave was sold in Virginia with a group of other slaves, that slavery has impacted us. And when we've gotten slavery, we also were impacted by Jim Crow. And then after Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, now we have mass incarceration. And so even through all of those each waves of those oppressive acts that happened to us, it damaged our spirit, it damaged our families, and it damaged our communities. Redlining damaged our communities. So the explicit and implicit racism that we experience has damaged our communities physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And so I would like to offer a new balm in Gilead, a new balm to ease that pain. And I can hear you now in the Black community, those that have grown up in church and have left and like, oh my gosh, I do not want to hear about Jesus. I do not want to hear about your white Jesus or anything like that. I have nothing to do with that because he was a part of the problem. I want to let you know that Jesus was not a part of the problem, but the way he was represented by certain people in this country, and how the Christianity was manipulated to be used to enslave and keep us enslaved and impoverished, and also utilized to promote white supremacy. That is not Christianity. That is white supremacy at its best. That is not what Christ said about his own ministry and what he was all about. For example, he said when he came into his ministry, Jesus said this exactly in Luke 4, chapter 4, verse 18. And he was talking about himself when he was asked to read a portion in the church, in the synagogue. This is what he said about his ministry, quoting Isaiah. He said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." And he closed the book, speaking of Jesus, and he gave it again to the minister and sat down, and the eyes of all of them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say unto them, speaking of Jesus, this day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. Luke 4:18 through 22. So what Jesus said about his ministry, he said that he was here to preach the gospel to the poor, that he was here to bind the brokenhearted, that he was here to set at liberty those that were bound. That is the message of Jesus Christ. That is what Jesus was all about. That's what Jesus was all about with the woman at the well in John 4, who was a Samaritan woman, and he offered her water that she would never have to be thirsty again. That's what the Jesus we're talking about. That helped in John 14, the woman who was caught in adultery, and I literally lifted her up and told her to go and sin no more. That's the Jesus I'm talking about. The Jesus that died on the cross for the sins of humanity, all people, and took it upon himself and rose on the third day with all power in his hand to give us a new look at life. That's the Jesus. Not the Jesus that we're accustomed to of seeing in mainstream media. That's not Christianity. And so I'm imploring you, Black community, that there is a bomb. There is a bomb in Gilead, and it's not in legalized marijuana. It's not in substances. It's not in money. It's not in the black dollar. It is in Jesus Christ. So thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate you. Please drop something in the chat or comment on this feed. Thank you. Have a blessed day.